All right. Happy Monday, everybody. We got a three-man weave Green with Envy edition here. All-star reserves are coming out later this week. We're going to give you our picks. We're going to hit on trying to figure out what happened this weekend, and we'll look at the week ahead for the Celtics here. So you know what time it is. Let's lock in. What up, what up, what up? Welcome into another edition of Green with Envy, three-man weave edition. As always, this is your boy Will Weir checking in. How you doing? How you living? First up, joining me today, my best friend, co-host, and the coach of our podcast, the one and only Greg Manakis. How you doing, man?
Good, man. I've only had half a cup of coffee, so I'm still getting there. Everyone bear with me.
I'm with you. It's going to be an interesting ride throughout this entire podcast. And a guy who's already living half of his Mondays actually already over, our podcast and cousin from across the pond, the lead writer for Celtics blog. It's the one and only leader of the Taylor gang. It's Adam Taylor.
I'm on mute. I got it. I'm off talking.
Here's the thing. I just gave you credit for being your day's already halfway over. You're the first guy to speak. It's on mute. This is where Greg and I are going to be messing up today.
Yeah, you see, so this, my day's half over, which means I'm already coming off that peak of the day. You get what I'm saying? I peaked about 2 hours ago when I was hyper focused on stuff, and now I'm just starting to get drowsy. But no, I'm good. It's a gloomy Monday here. But there's basketball to talk about. There's some Celtics games later today. I'm living.
Yeah, man, I'm excited. I mean, it's rare that you get me up before the sun comes up. Usually the sun's got to be up before your boy gets up. But when we got to make it work for the three-man wheel, we got to put one together. We got to do what we got to do. So we're gonna get through this coffee as we go through the show. But real quick, just appreciate anybody that's joining us today. We're actually live on Twitter right now if you're up at this time of day. So feel free to go ahead and put some comments in. We'll try to get to those. And then if you're listening here on any of our other audio formats, as always, make sure that you guys are subscribed to our Discord. If you're watching on YouTube, we do have memberships live. So if you want to get some of these episodes a little bit early, you want to make sure that you have some direct interaction with the three of us. Greg and Adam are going to do some crunch times. Make sure that you guys sign up for that membership. We do appreciate any support that you can give. But with that, all-star starters, we haven't had a chance to have this conversation yet, so we wanted to do it today. All-star starters we're already going to be voted on by the players, media, and then 50% of the fan vote. That came out last week, and Greg and I touched on this on one of our last podcasts here. Shout out to Jayson Tatum, back in the all-star starting lineup, his fifth all-star appearance. He'll be in that starting lineup for the Eastern Conference, along with Tyrese Halliburton, Damian Lillard, Giannis Antetokounmpo, which I love that Charles Barkley still cannot say or even get vaguely close to being able to say a two-time MVP his last name, and he's been covering the league the entire time he's been in it. And then we have, of course, Joel Embiid to round out that starting five. As you see here, we're just kind of pulling up some of the voting that the players had, the media and fans, and kind of where it all stood when we got down to the final five starters. But let's just start here. Greg, I'll go to you here. Did between all three of these entities, did they get it right? Are these the five starters that it should be?
No, they didn't get it right. And I think you'll know who I'm saying it should be left off, Dame Lillard. Although the Bucks do have a great record, second in the East, I think Jalen Brunson deserves to be in that starting five. This has been much ballyhooed, but I think the fact that Knicks fans did not get Jalen Brunson in, they should be ashamed of themselves. Jalen Brunson absolutely deserves to be a starter this year. What he's done for the Knicks, he's been by far the best player on the Knicks team that continues to raise to new levels. Randall's probably going to be out for the foreseeable future with that shoulder injury, but I do think that Brunson's ability to level up his game. You and I kind of called this a little bit last year, where at the end, probably mid-spring last year, I said the conversation and the narrative around Jalen Brunson hasn't quite caught up with his actual reputation as a player and what he's doing on the court. Because I don't know if you remember, Will, but I said that at this time next year, I said he would be looked at as the better player than Ja Morant. I don't know if that's necessarily true that he's better than Ja Morant, but for this season, he's definitely been the better player because Ja has barely been on the court. So I think Jalen Brunson absolutely deserves flowers to be in the starting lineup.
What do you think, Adam?
This is a Celtics podcast. Drew Holiday deserves to be in that starting lineup, man. I'm not backing down. No, I agree that Brunson probably should have been at Dame. Dame's the bigger name. He's on one of the better teams in the East. They're ranked second. Brunson, as you eloquently put it, definitely deserves to be in that starting five. Obviously, only 5 guys are getting in there, but because it's a Celtics podcast and we need to have a little bit of bias here, I'll be the one to kind of put the green goggles on for a few moments and just be like, it should have been Drew. Or in fact, no, it should have been Derrick. Let's be honest with ourselves.
I think out of the two, there's a more realistic guard candidate that's going to come up in this discussion.
Yeah, I mean, look, I like Brunson a lot. There's clips going around online of him today, crossing guys up and then crossing back and then getting to his spot and firing away. The Knicks have been really, really scary since they acquired Anunoby, and Brunson's kind of been the spearhead there. Lillard on the other side of things, kind of, he's been shackled by Griffin a little bit. I feel like there was times where he was in more of an off-ball role where you would have preferred him to be on the ball. Defense is always an issue there. You could say the same about Brunson defensively. Then you look over at the Celtics, and they've got 2 guys that can do it on both sides of the floor. It seems like we're only focusing on offense right now when we're talking about the All-Star, because nobody wants to watch an All-Star just lock guys up on defense in a game where no one's playing defense. You're a victim of the times, man, a victim of the times.
Well, let me ask you this, Adam, because Greg and I started this conversation a little bit the other day, and, looking at the Knicks as a threat to the Celtics, like you said, since they've made that OG trade, I believe they're 12-2. They just had a big win on national TV against the Miami Heat, where much like the Celtics from last week, really kind of, Miami's 6-game losing streak now. So, both teams really kind of beat up on Miami. But how scary, to what you said, how scary are the Knicks becoming as an actual threat? And all of this is really tied into Jalen Brunson being the face and the leader of that team. Do you think they're starting to get into an area where, you're keeping another eye, not just on Philly, not just on Milwaukee, but maybe even adding New York to that conversation?
I have New York in this weird spot, whereas they could have made the second round without Anunoby. I had them as a second round ceiling, whereas now I feel like they're a second round floor, right? And then whatever comes after the second round is kind of whatever, right? If you get to the conference finals, it's house money at that point. If you go further, it's house money at that point. But I feel like they went from being, if we get to the second round, like it's house money, to no, we need to be in that second round, and anything afterwards is that house money. So Anunoby definitely raised their floor, but I don't think he raised their ceiling too tough, if that makes sense. I still think that they're that one piece away from where I'm like, oh, damn, it's Boston, Milwaukee, New York. And I want it to get there. I really like the idea of having a dominant New York team that Boston have to go against year after year for a few years. I think that's good for the ratings. I think it's good for the fans. It's definitely kind of like a local market rivalry. I'd like that to get there. But for right now, I think their floor's been raised, but I don't see their ceiling having taken too much of a step forward.
Yeah, and it's funny. You just mentioned rivalry. Did you guys see that photo that was going around Twitter maybe yesterday or the day before about from Reddit users of who they believe their fan base is a rival with?
No,
you guys haven't seen it. So basically, like, it had just the map of all the NBA teams and it had all their different rivals. I think there was 9 teams that thought the Celtics were either their primary or secondary rival. It was insane. Apparently, the funniest one was apparently the Wizards think there's some type of rivalry there that no one else is aware about besides them.
Well, that probably dates back to the one playoff
series that they have, right? Yeah,
years.
Exactly. But it was just funny hearing that. But I think from that Knicks perspective, they are like to your point, Adam. I really like the way you put that. They were a second round ceiling. With OG, they kind of became a second round floor is more likely kind of where they land. And then today or over this weekend, Greg and I were chatting with a friend of ours that's a Knicks fan. And this will be kind of our last part before we move on to some of the picks here. But you said they're kind of one piece away. There was, I don't even know if it was a rumor. It was more just like a hypothetical like thought exercise. But if the Nets ever get into we're not going to just wait around and see if we can get Donovan Mitchell. We're willing to listen to a Mikal Bridges offer. And let's say the Knicks could get it done with Fournier, Grimes, if there's other salary that needs to be in there, and 4 unprotected first-round picks, and they were to bring Mikal Bridges basically just straight up into their rotation right now. You said one guy. Would Mikal Bridges be scary enough?
Yeah, because I don't buy into this. You need that star name. You just need a player that can develop it into being a star name. Stars are stars because they're in an opportunity to develop into being stars. They're in an opportunity to be that featured guy. You know, if you don't play Jayson Tatum X amount of minutes his rookie year, do we still view him the same way? If he doesn't have that deep postseason run, do we still see him that way? I think Bridges on like a bigger, and I hate to pull it like this because everyone's playing in the NBA, but with a bigger platform, with a bigger audience and more national TV games. As the Knicks get better, they're going to get more and more national TV time. They'll be spoke about as frequently as the Lakers because it's that type of market. Plus Stephen A on ESPN. I love Stephen A. It's my guilty pleasure. But then, like, you know, I really do think that Bridges could be that guy. Whether or not people agree is one thing. Whether or not he can shoulder that expectation as well, because he's going to be going into a situation where there's more pressure than he's probably ever going to have dealt with before from that New York media, when playing in Madison Square Garden with that fan base. It's tough, and that's where bringing somebody kind of battle tested, like a Donovan Mitchell or somebody of that kind of level that's been in deep playoff runs, that has a bit of experience dealing with that type of expectation, might be more beneficial in the immediate sense. But I do think Bridges could be that guy. He is that guy, pal.
Yeah, I know. I agree. And my main point with the Knicks right now, apparently we're in a Knicks podcast right now, but my main point with the Knicks right now,
to the Celtics, we're all keeping it together,
is that they need to get through the Celtics, right? Especially if they end up in the 4-5, Celtics having the 1 seed, you know, we'll see. The Celtics are going through their first like struggle of the season right now, especially with the big men that might be out in the next game and for the rest of the week. But I do think that for the Knicks, they have to look at the Celtics and see, do we have the roster to get through the Celtics? And they're getting there. I think they have the right piece at center to be able to get out to Porzingis and Hartenstein. They have the right wing to guard Jayson Tatum and OG. They have the right type of guard that can give the Celtics guards some problems. Jalen Brunson, you just can't really stop him. So if you get Mikal Brunches, you get Mikal, that's the lack of coffee. If you get Mikal Bridges into this bunch, there we go. That's what I was trying to say. Into this bunch of Knicks, they have the 2 wing defenders to go up against Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown, right? And that's where you got to be scared if they get Bridges. But I do think that Bridges, you know, he is battle tested. He played in the NBA Finals, so it's not like he's not battle tested. He just hasn't dealt with the media scrutiny that you would see.
And he wasn't the same level as like featured scorer, right? Like he wasn't in that role, and I think that's where the kind of juxtaposition between what we've seen from him at the NBA Finals versus what we would see from him in a potential NBA Finals would be completely different, because that role brings extra pressure, extra scrutiny.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, you know, the 2 guys that came over to the Nets from the Suns, and Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges, I think Mikal Bridges has kind of outperformed what people thought of him and like what his reputation is on the Nets. People are like, oh, Mikal Bridges kind of has more of a bag than we thought. And Cam Johnson seems to be more of that role player that needs a lot of stars around him. I think people kind of hyped up Cam Johnson a little too much, and he hasn't really done anything with the Nets because he's like a little too leveled up for what he's actually good at. Right. And I think you saw that with Team USA as well, where it's like Cam Johnson didn't do shit for Team USA. He's just not that good. Mikal Bridges has shown that he is that guy. So I think if the Knicks got Bridges, I'd be pretty scared.
Yeah, that's a scary duo to think about, OG and Mikal being able to bring them out in the wings against the Jays. Like I said, I think for the Knicks, they just don't have quite enough scoring. Bridges is going to be a guy that's going to give you defense and scoring to really level up. And then Brunson, because he's a little shorter, thicker, not quite the biggest guy. So you have these 2 long, rangy defenders right behind him. And then if they get Mitchell Robinson back, even as, you know, like Greg said, Hartenstein's a better matchup for the Celtics, but you can still put Mitchell Robinson in and cause some havoc in certain places. So I think this is a good transition here, because we know who the starters are in the East. Let's get to the reserves. It sounds like, so there's, just to set this up for everybody listening, for the reserve setup, there is 2 backcourt players, there is 3 frontcourt players, and then 2 wild cards that can be any position that will be on this team. So we got 7 guys to go through. It sounds like from our conversations here, as we look at the backcourt for these, and we're going to take this kind of like section by section here. So let's start in the backcourt. Sounds like we're all in that Jalen Brunson is getting one of these first 2 backcourt spots. Anybody disagree on that? All right, I'm seeing head shake. So we're good on that. So we got Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson is getting one of the Green with NB All-Star spots that we have. let's go to the second guard spot. And for me, this is where I think there's probably I have a certain guy that I think's in the lead, but overall, I've got, I've got 3 different guys that I think qualify as a guard that could either fall into this spot or then would fall into the debate that we might have for wild card spots. So the 3 guys that I'm looking at, and you guys tell me if I'm missing anybody here, I've got Donovan Mitchell, Derrick White, and Trae Young as the 3 remaining guard candidates that I would look to fill that spot. Have I missed anybody?
No, I think that's right.
I'm confident with that.
Okay. So having said that, we've got Donovan Mitchell, Derrick White, and Trae Young. For me personally, I think the way that the season has played out right now with the role that this player has, I got to go Donovan Mitchell in this second guaranteed spot. I think just kind of what he has to do for that Cleveland team. And when you kind of compile on top of it that Darius Garland and Evan Mobley have been out for so long, and it's mostly just been Donovan Mitchell and Jared Allen night after night carrying it. I mean, this team has been 14-4 over their last 18. That's from right after they left the Garden, which is where Darius Garland got hurt. They've been really a team that's on the rise. We talk about the Knicks. Adam, I'm kind of with you where I feel like the Knicks and Cavs live in the same space in my head in the Eastern Conference of how much of threats they really are or what their potential is. I got the Knicks probably a little ahead of the Cavs right now, just given the injuries. But Donovan Mitchell's been pretty special this year. So that would be who I go with in that spot. Where would you go, Adam?
Yeah, so how can I put this nicely? I'm lower than most on Trae Young. So
well, you're on the right podcast for it.
Yeah, lower than most on Trae Young. So I don't see Trae Young being that guy to earn a guaranteed spot. And mainly because, again, the defense really bugs me. And this is a game where there won't be any defense. But I kind of lean with you. I think that Mitchell does more for his team offensively than White. He's also more of a featured guy on that team. He's classed as a star. He's had all stars. There's so much media around his potential future right now. Like, you don't get to that level of kind of coverage without being an elite player. And you don't put up the numbers and the performances that he's doing consistently without being at an elite level. It just makes sense that it's Mitchell. I think Brunson and Mitchell as the reserve backcourt makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I agree. And this brings me to just like a larger conversation I think we could have around Donovan Mitchell. My brother actually texted me the other day, and he was, knows a shit ton about basketball, knows probably more than I do, just isn't covering it all the time. And he just asked me, he's like, why do you think Donovan Mitchell isn't talked about as like one of the superstars of the league? Because like from his perspective, he doesn't really listen to NBA media. So he just like watches the game, and he loves Donovan Mitchell. He thinks Donovan Mitchell is one of the best players in the league. And like, I kind of was like swayed by talking to him about how good Donovan Mitchell is, because like, I think I consume so much NBA media, and NBA media, I think overall is down on Donovan Mitchell. I think it kind of like subconsciously has made me view his game a little bit differently than how when I tune in and watch Donovan Mitchell, I'm just like, God damn, this guy's good. Like, there's just like nobody that can stop him. There's no one that can stay in front of him. I think he's a better defender when he tries. I think the biggest knock that you can have on Mitchell is he expends so much energy on offense. He doesn't really save it for the defensive end, but he can. When Donovan Mitchell wants to play lockdown defense, he's more than capable, very like Ant Edwards in that way. So I do think with Donovan Mitchell, I would 100% to answer the question, I would put him, yes, he's the second backcourt guy here, but also just like, I think I want to just like kind of plant my flag on the hill that Donovan Mitchell like should be a lock for all-star games moving forward. I think he's that good.
I think he's the guy that you look to that's like, all right, once again, using this floor term, his floor is an all-star guy, and then his ceiling is can be first team all NBA, right? That's kind of the range that he lives in. And I think collectively on Donovan Mitchell, a little bit of the sour taste in the collective media mouth is just the first round series against the Knicks last year. I think that left everybody a little bit unsure and down on Cleveland, because I think last year was probably the peak of people being bought in that like, hey, maybe Donovan Mitchell is going to like take this Cleveland team and make a run to the conference finals and put a scare into, what we thought was going to be Boston, Milwaukee. And then they kind of flamed out pretty quickly in a 5-game series against the Knicks. So I think that's a part. I'm not saying that's right, but I think that's probably the narrative.
Well, to me, that's more of a fit of the Cavs than Donovan Mitchell's talent, right? It's like Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland going up against the one team that plays like 90s basketball with like a lot of physicality, probably not the best move there. That's probably too small of a backcourt. And I think if Donovan Mitchell said, I'm staying in Cleveland, then the Cavs could then be like, okay, well, you're staying now. We can maybe figure out a better backcourt partner for you. And then with Mobley, Mobley and Allen, they're kind of like living in the same space as well. So roster construction, maybe it's more about that than it is about Donovan Mitchell being a good enough player to lead a team. Because I think as we've seen throughout Donovan Mitchell's career, if you have Donovan Mitchell on your team, you're probably going to win around 50 games.
Yeah. And I think you're seeing right now, this is part of like kind of the not knowing what to do with Cleveland in the East, is that you're seeing him and Jared Allen without Garland and Mobley, and they could put lineups around that make a little bit more sense. So it's like, to your point, but Cleveland's in a tough spot. They can't make a move until they know that Donovan Mitchell's staying, because you can't trade the younger Garland or Mobley and get other pieces that make sense if you're not sure of what that long-term looks like. But Donovan Mitchell, he gets that spot. So I think I thought it was pretty easy for those two guard spots. I did omit a guard name, which no one called me out on, which we'll get back to that particular name here later. But I think for those two guard spots, Jalen Brunson, Donovan Mitchell, I think that's kind of the easy spot to lock them in to those two backcourt spots. So the other guys that we didn't get a chance to talk about a little bit more, we'll circle back to them here when we get to the wild cards. Let's go to the front court, because this is going to bring in some more Celtic talk here. So we've got 3 front court spots to look at here that we're going to go ahead and lock in. And I'll be honest, for me, I've got one lock out of these 3. The other ones I'm kind of open to debate. I have an idea of where I would lean, but the one lock that I would have for the spot, that's Jaylen Brown. I think Jaylen Brown has been he's been the 4th best front court player in the East so far this year. So for me, I think this is pretty easy. And I think the voting from the fans, media, and players actually indicated that as well, that Jaylen Brown was right there. Him and Jimmy Butler were right there on that 4-5 line of, getting into that all-star starter conversation. But for me, when I look at the front court, Jaylen Brown is the one definitive lock that I have. Adam, do you agree? And then do you have anyone else that maybe you would lock in?
I'm locking in Jaylen Brown. The moment I get the opportunity, you can lock that clean in. Unfortunately, as much as it hurts, and believe me, this hurts, I'm going to have to lock in Jimmy.
Okay.
And that makes me sad. I just think that what he means to Miami, how their offense has struggled, that their lack of creation, obviously you rely on Tyler Hero for a lot of that. For a majority of the season, you've had Kyle Lowry as the secondary creator. He doesn't really have that same step, that same burst. A lot's been put on Butler to kind of just bully ball his way to the rim, and kind of he's added or expanded his 3-point game, I should say, a little bit. He's playing in a system that's just flawed at the moment. I think if you look at a lot of Miami fans, their arguments is there's poor spacing, some of the executions aren't working, the reads aren't being made at a level that we saw last year. Whether Terry can fix that, we'll wait and see. But I think that Butler's just kind of, him and Bam have kind of kept things going. They're still making them respectable. And Jimmy's Jimmy, man. He's an all-star. And until he's not, and this year is not the year that he's not, I feel like he gets locked in.
Yeah, to me, I think the Jimmy Butler reputation and for what he does in the playoffs, and we know that he's one of the top 15 guys in the league. Like, there, if you're just like on the playground lining people up in a winner takes all, like game to 15, Jimmy Butler is going to be one of the top picks. Like, he's that guy, and he's going to play with so much intensity. The thing is, he just doesn't do it in the regular season, and like, I freaking hate that he doesn't try in the regular season. So I'm not going to reward him for that. Like, if I'm going to reward one of the Heat players, it's going to be Bam. Bam, I'm very biased towards Bam. Like, I would love to see Bam Adebayo on the Celtics at some point in his career. I think that he's just such a problem on the defensive end, and he keeps expanding his offensive repertoire to Adam's point about Butler kind of being a little bit more consistent from 3. I think Bam, just what he's able to do in the dribble handoff game and how he unlocks a lot of the stagnation in their offense, especially with Duncan Robinson. Like, Duncan Robinson's not the same guy if he doesn't have Bam Adebayo to kind of play with, similar to like Clay and Steph. They need Draymond, right? I think Bam unlocks so much of what the Heat are able to do. And then I also think he's one of the top like 3 big men defenders in basketball. The people that I've said this on the pod before, but people that say Jaren Jackson Jr. is on the same level as Bam Adebayo, to me, is absolutely insane. I think that Bam is just like Jaren Jackson's bigger and a better rim protector, but I think overall as a defender, I think Bam just blows him out of the water. So I would put Bam as my next guy. And then obviously Jaylen, you know me. I mean, imagine if on this pod, I was like, you know what? I don't really know about Jaylen.
You know what people aren't talking about enough? I'm not really sold on Jaylen Brown. I don't know if you guys have been following the podcast, but yeah, no, Jalen's been, I mean, you've been leading this ship on this show that, this is the best we've ever seen Jaylen Brown. And I think it took a minute for everyone collectively in the, I'm saying collectively in the media to see that, because the numbers were down initially, and you just look at the contract, numbers were down. There was the first couple games where I think there was a feel out period. And so I think it took a minute, but I think just about everybody's there now that this is the best version of Jaylen Brown that we have seen to this point. And I would be shocked if he's not going to be one of the guys that's pretty easily announced come Thursday night.
Yeah, that was a really interesting part of the season, right? Where Jaylen started playing a lot better, and you could just see it. If you've watched Jaylen every day, you're like, oh, he's starting to figure it out. The game's slowing down for him a little bit, but so many people still had these like preconceived notions of who Jaylen Brown was, and they still held all these biases against Jaylen. And I was like, don't just like stop allowing your brain to trick your eyes. Like your eyes are seeing a better player. And it took everybody. I was there. You know me. I'm gonna take my victory lap right now. I was there very early on. I was like, I'm seeing the differences, and then everybody was like, "You're a fucking idiot. Like you don't know what you're talking about. Jaylen Brown can't dribble. Jaylen Brown can't do this." I'm like, just wait. Like I promise you, in a month, you're gonna like the numbers are gonna catch up, and it did. And he absolutely deserves to be in this All-Star game, like no question. If the Celtics only get 2 All-Stars, like enough with the Derrick White talk, enough with the Kristaps Porzingis talk. It's Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown if the Celtics get 2. And we can talk about if White or Porzingis ends up in there, but it's Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Enough with the other talk.
Yeah, Jaylen seems like a pretty easy lock here. So far, we're all in agreement on Jaylen Brown. I'm going to join this Miami Heat conversation because I kind of just looked at it as one of the Heat guys is getting in. They're not getting to the way that they're playing. And if I have to take one out of the 2 guys for an all-star perspective, I'm going to go Bam just because he's played more. And it's only 5 games. It's kind of a, it's not the most nuanced way to go about picking this, but he's been available more. Greg, as you said, I love Jimmy Butler. I get a little frustrated that, I don't get frustrated because I'm a Celtics fan, but if I were a Heat fan, I would get a little frustrated that I look at the box score and he's shooting 7 of 11, 6 of 10. It's like, dude, shoot more. We need more shooting. We need more scoring. Like to Adam's point of all the stuff that's funky and weird, you can correct some of that by being more aggressive, but he kind of chooses not to. And it's, playing a little bit of long game. So be it. I would go Bam as that second spot, but if you want to take either of those Heat guys, I don't really care. I think one of them gets on and I'm cool with it. So that leaves us one more guaranteed front court spot. And this right now, I think there's a couple of guys that this could fall to. I think we have, so I'm going to list a couple of guys that I have as candidates for this spot. I think this is where Kristaps comes into play. This could be a potential Kristaps Porzingis spot. If the Celtics are to get 3, this could be the first time that we see that happen. Then you've got Paolo Banchero from Orlando. I think you've got Jared Allen from Cleveland. I think he's a real candidate that's in this mix. Julius Randle, who we talked about already a little bit at the top, has that shoulder injury, so he might not even play, but let's just keep that to the side for now that, let's just talk about what he's actually done on the court. And then I think the final guy that I would look at in this mix would be Scotty Barnes, who's had a really, really good year, just obviously a very underperforming Toronto team, and now they've made all these trades. You could throw Siakam in this mix if you want as well. He's had a good year. Any other candidates that you guys think would be in the mix for this final guaranteed front court spot?
Have you mentioned Paolo?
Yeah, I mentioned Paolo.
Okay, yeah, then no.
I'm just looking here because I'm not sure you can Yeah, you can. It doesn't matter. Ignore me.
Well, I think one of the things that I wanted to talk about is just like criteria for somebody making an all-star team and the level of team success. Like with Scotty Barnes, especially being so early on in his career, Scotty Barnes is going to make all-star games. And like we can't just be so quick to be like, oh, he's having the best year of his career on a shitty team, so Scotty Barnes deserves to be an all-star. You know what I mean? Like Jayson Tatum was having a lot of issues getting into the All-Star game early on in his career. And nobody was just like, oh, Jayson Tatum's having the best year of his career. He's clearly going to be great. Let's move him into the All-Star game. He had to earn it. And I think Scottie Barnes needs to earn it before he's actually in there. He's having the best year of his career. I'm a huge Scottie Barnes guy, but like, let's not just elevate him 1 year early because he's playing well. I think it's okay for Raptors fans to start talking about him so that next year, if he doesn't get in, then maybe you can call it a snub. And he's at least in those conversations now. And I think that's the right place for Scottie Barnes to be right now, where you juxtapose that with Paolo, another young guy, only year 2 for Paolo. He's been the featured guy with Franz being out. The Magic have not played as well as they did early in the season, but they're still hanging in there in the play-in picture. I think right now they're 8th in the East, if my memory serves me right. So I think with Paolo, he probably deserves to be in there. You know, he's number 1 pick in the draft a year ago. I think that's good for the league to see him in the All-Star game this early, especially like as they try and rebuild in Orlando. Not that it's a huge market or anything, but they've had success over the years. You know what I mean? And I like to see that. Maybe that's just my bias towards kind of being a Magic fan. When I was growing up, like I want to see the Magic be good again. And I think Paolo deserves it.
What about Siakam? Are we not having Siakam in the conversation?
No,
He's
I think
putting up similar.
I threw him in there at the end. I wasn't quite sure what to do with Siakam yet, but I think he's definitely someone that's worth mentioning.
Yeah, look, to me, if you look at what he's doing this season versus what he did last season, the numbers are slightly down, the impact's slightly down, but it's still in the same ballpark as last season where he was an all-star, right? And
yeah.
I know moving to a new team, that's going to change things, and it kind of changes the perception a little bit because you want to see how he does with Indiana before you start making decisions
this is the right time for you to be doing that. I mean, with Halliburton still out, he just, he's starting to find his last 2 games were wins against Phoenix and wins against Philly, I believe, who had Embiid playing in that game. And so those are 2 big wins for Siakam to be the main guy on a new team without their all-star starter and Tyrese Halliburton. Like that says a lot about what he brings to Indiana right there.
And this is where you kind of have to be like, okay, so yeah, Paolo deserves it. Paolo's playing great, as Greg explained last year, first overall rookie of the year coming into this season. Paolo, he's ace. I love Paolo, one of my favorite young guys in the NBA. But if we're talking about not rushing Scotty, should we kind of be like, well, Siakam's just kind of over here to decide doing his thing, doesn't really seem to fit much of the narrative of being an all-star, but is playing like an all-star. Like, should he be getting kind of leapfrogged by Paolo because Paolo has a bigger platform at the moment because he was the first overall pick and then won rookie of the year? Or do we go with Siakam that we know is trusted and has pretty much been playing like an all-star all season if we base an all-star on what he was this time last year?
Yeah, I think that's a fair conversation. I think Julius Randle fits that mold as well too, right? Like Julius Randle's been, he's to a degree how we said that, Jaylen Brown got off to a bad start. Julius Randle got off to a horrific start, right? Like he was buried. And then now he's right back to the Julius Randle numbers that we've seen him have, where he's been an all-star and all NBA, as crazy as that sounds, 2 of the last 3 years. That's a fact. That's something that's been true with Julius Randle.
I also think he's not going to play in the All-Star game. He just dislocated his shoulder. So if you want to get more guys in, just give this to Randle and then he can just not play and we can put somebody else in. I think that's probably what they'll do, honestly, because he deserves it. It's not like he doesn't deserve it. So it's an easy way to get somebody else in.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of guys that it could be. Let's one guy we haven't mentioned. Do you guys think that so we're talking about how many Celtics can make the All-Star game? Is there, and we're going to get to the wild cards here in just a second, is there a legitimate case to say that Kristaps Porzingis has been one of the top, because this would now be including the starters, top 6 front court guys in the East? Does Kristaps have a legit case?
I think so. I think with Porzingis, you see when he doesn't play, the Celtics don't look like the same team on either end of the floor, right? Like his ability to protect the rim, and for the Celtics to top lock and force things into the middle and to play and drop and all that stuff that they're able to do because of Porzingis. I think that the offensive side of the ball as well, just what he does spacing the floor. We talked about Al Horford, although he's shooting a career high, over 40% from 3, he doesn't command the same respect that Porzingis does and stretching the floor out to 30 feet like Porzingis. So I do think I actually have Porzingis written down as my 3rd front court guy. The issue with him is going to be games played. I think that's going to be the biggest argument against Porzingis. But in terms of impact, and for me, criteria of having such a great team like the Celtics do, I think they probably deserve 3 guys, especially because some of the other guys that we see here are in teams that are a little bit more middling than the Celtics that are the cream of the crop right now, you know? So I would prefer, and we're going to get into Derrick White here in a second, but if there's anybody from the Celtics that gets the third spot, I would lean Porzingis over White. We can talk about that here in a second. But I do think that Kristaps Porzingis probably deserves to be on there, especially with Randall going out. You know, I think that the Knicks, I'm like sort of becoming a Knicks fan right now. It's like weird.
For the record, you've called yourself a Magic fan and now a Knicks fan on the Celtics show. So I'm just keeping track for future.
Well, I do think that like Randall, I hate Julius Randle as a player. Like I would not want him on my team. I think that's one of the biggest issues with Randall is that like he's so much more valuable to the Knicks than he is to anybody else. Like I don't think they could trade him for somebody of equal value. But I do think that for whatever reason, he works in New York and like his bully ball style of play is effective. And he's having one of the good Julius Randle years, and he's good, man. Like as much as I hate watching him play, and I think like I disagree with a lot of the decisions that he makes on the court. I think Julius Randle probably deserves to be in there just with the Knicks team success. And then with his shoulder injury, it's easy. Just throw him out there. And I'm looking around. Do I really want to give it to Jimmy Butler, who barely tries in the regular season? No. Do I really want to give it to Paolo, who I could probably slide in there as a wild card? Probably not. I'd rather give it to Porzingis because I think he's made such an impact and he's come in. And I think for someone who's had like a surly reputation, he's come in. He's been freaking awesome. Everybody loves Porzingis.
I love Porzingis.
Yeah, he's been amazing. I mean, I think that there's a very good case for him to be in the spot. He's played 33 games. I think that's probably the biggest knock is how many games has he played. Adam, tell me, who are the three guys that you would have who are the three guys that you wrote down for your front court spots?
Jaylen Brown, Jimmy, and then I wanted KP. I felt like it should be KP, but I ultimately ended up going with just Siakam, which is why I brought up Siakam.
Okay. And Greg, you went with Jaylen Brown, Bam, and KP, correct?
And KP, yeah.
Okay. I ended up going with Paolo here in this spot, and part of it is I mean, I think regardless, there's a bunch of candidates here for a wild card. So whether it's the wild card or it's the final front court spot, I went Paolo. I just feel like, you know, it's the second year. He plays just about every night, and he's carrying a weight for that team that, you know, we all thought they'd be frisky, but they've been, even though they've come back to earth, like they've been in the mix the entire season. And he is undoubtedly, even though Franz is awesome as well, like Paolo's the guy, right? It's year two, and he's already the guy. And he's had a bunch of stretches where he's had to put that team on his back because offensively, that's where it just kind of falls apart if you really want to make a case for the Magic to be like a secret kind of scary team. Like their offense is not great. And it's just lack of spacing, lack of shooting. And, you know, Paolo still finds a way to get it done night in and night out. It's really impressive what he can do. So I went with Jaylen, Paolo, and Bam as my three front court locks. So then that's going to bring us to the wild card spot. So we got two spots left. And one guy that I didn't mention for the guards here that actually is a lock for me here in the wild card spot, I forgot to mention Tyrese Maxey. Tyrese Maxey, for me, was the easiest call for a wild card lock because I think he's just an all-star. Like, I think he's in that, like, you could have put him, you know, honestly, this would have been more for me because I was with the conversation about Dame not being a starter. This is actually where I think Dame should be in the conversation as, like, is he a wild card? And then he's in the mix with all these other people. We can have a debate back and forth. I think with the way that it all shook out and Dame gets the starting role, you got to put Jaylen, you got to put Donovan, and I think Tyrese Maxey is another guy that I would lock in. Would you guys lock him in as well? Or would he be someone that you guys are, you know, could potentially see other people having cases?
You know what I find really funny? For all the talk of Zach LaVine, nobody even considers Zach LaVine.
Oh, fuck out of here.
You get what I'm saying? But then every team in the world's being linked with him.
Nobody wants him. They're also being linked to him.
That contract, bro. Like no chance.
It's a terrible contract.
That's an anchor. That is. Tyrese Maxey is a lock to step up. Like if you look at it from like a narrative perspective, from like a movie kind of thing, like your star player decides he wants out, forces his way out the team, goes to join the big bad wolf in the West right now in the Clippers that are actually playing to the level that they're supposed to be playing at.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, goodbye Harden. He goes over there, starts doing his thing, and you're like, shit, we only have one star. And Tyrese Maxey's like, hold my beer. And then boom, now you've got a two-man game going on. Tyrese Maxey is electric. He's a blur in the full court, blur in transition, can blow by you on the half court, strong as shit, can bully you around the rim, can defend at a high level. Two-man game with Embiid's been fantastic. He's an all-star. I just don't have a way. I'm not one to be like everyone's a superstar, but I'll happily be like he's an all-star because if he's not an all-star this year, it's a travesty and somebody needs to lose their job. As long as it's not any of us.
No, I agree. I think Maxey, especially because the Sixers were playing great basketball this year, the two-man game that he has with Embiid, it's pretty impossible to guard at this point.
Yeah.
Anytime I tune into the Sixers, I'm just like, man, this team just makes sense. Last year, they didn't really make sense, like how they were constructed. Just too slow, too predictable. They went pick and roll with Harden and Embiid, but in a very deliberate sense. It's just like two options that they were really getting. And James
We're looking
Harden,
at Doc Rivers directly in the eye right now, by the way.
Yeah. And I think that and James Harden, I think he plays at such a and Embiid, I think they play at the same pace, right? James Harden and Embiid play at the exact same pace, and Maxey plays at this like warp speed, like Sonic the Hedgehog, where like when you have that with Embiid, I think it's the right mix and right balance of paces to their game and speed to their game. Harden and Embiid is just too slow. So I think that with Maxey, the way that he's unlocked this other level of Embiid, even though Embiid didn't play in Denver again, just like, come on, bro.
I'm sick.
Yeah, it's shit's week Embiid. I think that Maxey deserves his spot. I had him written down 100%. He's on my all-star team.
Yeah, which is why I forgot to even mention him when I was like, here's the other guards we can debate, because I'd already just like penciled him in as a lock in my mind. But yeah, he's been awesome this year. And I think, we've said it before, Philly feels different than last year for all the reasons that Greg just laid out. And Maxey is the type of guard that I think in a 7-game series, it gets really interesting as a chess match to see what that looks like against, if we're having some drop coverage with Porzingis, to see, we've got the guys in Holiday and White that, can theoretically guard a guy like Maxey, but he's also the type of guard that can sometimes give us trouble. So I think that'll be really fascinating down the line, but Maxey definitely has elevated to, as you said, Adam, that star level. So he's locked in. And then we got one last spot, and we all have kind of a few different guys in the front court. So there's a bunch of different options here. I know for me, I think this is where if the Celtics already get 3, and I know, Greg, you've already got KP locked in. So you've got 3 Celtics here. For me, this would be the spot where maybe a third Celtic gets in. And then it becomes, what's your preference? Because I look at the guys that I have left on my list here. So my final candidates that I was looking at here are Derrick White, KP, Jared Allen, Julius Randle, which feels kind of like a travesty that I don't have him in now that we're kind of talking through this year, Trae Young, and then Scotty Barnes. So for me, it was like Trae Young and Scotty Barnes. Great stats, bad teams. I feel pretty easy about, leaving them out just because you gotta be better. Like Trae Young, you're 8 games under 500.
Yeah, I think you can make the argument that Murray's been the better player too.
And you could do that as well. So I'm fine with that, but so they're out. So I would just leave them out. And then for me, it becomes Derrick White, it becomes Kristaps, it becomes, I think Jared Allen has, like, I was really tempted to find a way to try to put Jared Allen in this. He's been about 19 and 13 over the last 20 games, and just with the way him and Mitchell have played. But if I'm going to do that, I feel like I got to get Julius Randle in, because he's also been, just as good, if not better, for what he does for the Knicks. And then you have the Celtics, who are the best team in the league. And Derrick White, like, this is the case. This is the time where it's like, and this has always been his best chance, is that coaches look at Derrick White like he impacts winning in different ways every single night. And of course, coaches are going to love that, right? Like, that's the narrative that's going to speak to coaches and give him a chance. And he's having the best statistical season of his career, right? And so there is a reasonable case for Derrick White to get this spot. I think you could make a case for a bunch of different guys, but it's really tough to say that there's one that sticks out than the other. For me, in this last spot, I think I'd have to go Randle with the guys I have left. With the guys that I have left, I'd have to go Randle, and then that leaves the door open for. I really don't know. I think this last spot's really hard. I think it's really hard. I think you could go so many different ways. Who are the guys that you're thinking? I'll go to you, Greg, here for that last spot.
Just want to pull up this tweet from Brian Barrett here. So last 15 games, Derrick White shooting 38% from the field, 34% from 3. First 27 games, 50% from the field, 42% from 3. And about 15 games ago, I tweeted out, for Derrick White to make the All-Star team, he needs to continue to play at this level. I was like, let's just wait to see that, like, the next level shooting and the next level scoring that we've seen out of him remains consistent. A lot of guys are able to have great 27 game sample sizes, where they look like an all-star, because all the stuff that Derrick White does, little things, yes, absolutely impacts winning at a level that nobody else really does on the Celtics roster, just doing the little things on the court. But I think the argument for him being an all-star this year was not only was he doing the little things, he was also elevating with all the percentages around the board, especially shooting the rock. And he's kind of come back down to earth. Maybe that's the JJ Redick curse, whatever you want to say. But I do think that for Derrick White to be an all-star this year, he couldn't have had this drastic of a dip over the last 15 games. If maybe it was 45% and 38% instead of 38% and 35%, maybe you could have made that argument. But I just think with other guys like a Siakam, who's now going to be, if Siakam was on Indy all year, I don't think there's a question. I think Siakam's in this all-star game. You know what I mean? He was just kind of in a shit situation in Toronto. So with these numbers out of Derrick White, as much as I love Derrick White and I think he's amazing, I just don't think that you can elevate him to an all-star at this point. I think this is the right moment for Derrick White to just like be like, oh, he was in the conversation this year. Right. That's great. Like next year, if he continues to play at this level and it's like, oh, it wasn't just this 27 game sample size where he was an actual all-star and not just like a role player all-star, then I do think that, maybe next year we can revisit the conversation. He couldn't afford this dip and the dip happened.
I don't really know how to argue back with this because like I said at the top of the show, when it comes to selecting an all-star, I always tend, especially like obviously it's not like any of us have a say in it, but I always tend to look at two-way impact, because to me, that's what makes you an all-star, being able to impact the game on both sides of the floor. Obviously, as I've said, when you go into the all-star game, no one's playing defense. So if you're selecting somebody like Derrick White in terms of an entertainment standpoint, and he does so much defensively, so many little things, but his offense has came back down to earth, what does he really bring the production value of that weekend? And I know for fans that's not something we really need to care about, but there's going to be people in the league that genuinely care about that. Like, how do we market somebody going 1 for 4 from deep in a game when no one was defending them? Because over his career, White has been kind of streaky in that sense from deep, where you could go to, I don't know, a Kristaps Porzingis and have that unicorn factor of another 7-foot big man being able to spread the floor, do all these things that he shouldn't be able to do. We can market that, and he still gives you all the defense that you need to be an all-star, but he's going to give you that offensive punch. So I think if it did come down to KP and D White, KP gets it because of not only what he brings to the floor, but also what he brings to that weekend in terms of marketability, in terms of entertainment. Because I do think that that's a factor that gets overlooked a lot. And it might be something that a lot of fans hate and they just want to see the best players get rewarded, but it's an entertainment industry. And when you stop remembering that the NBA is an entertainment industry, which it is, that's why they push the type of highlights and type of clips that they do is for entertainment. You start forgetting that, guys that Marcus Smarts of the world don't really make all-star games. They play like an all-star sometimes, but they don't give you that pop. Yeah. So yeah, I've got Porzingis there. I like I forgot who the other candidates were now because I've been so focused
Jared
on
Allen, Randall.
Yeah, see, I like Allen, gives you above the rim. Randall gives you a lot. I like Randall a lot in this position, but I'm gonna go with KP because this is a Celtics podcast. Yeah. And I've joked around about that at the start when I went Drew, then I went White, but real talk, I think KP should be a wild card.
Yeah, I think my final wild card is going to be Randall, who will likely be out for injury, and I think KP gets that spot. That's what I'm going to predict. I think will happen, something along those lines. I think Randall deserves it for the entirety of the season. He's played a little bit more than KP, but KP's efficiencies have been crazy. And Greg, all of us here, we've talked about it. Like, when KP's on that court, the Celtics can be at a different level. And we saw it on Saturday night. When you take him out, the Celtics they're certainly not an average team, but they're more in line with the rest of the high-level teams in the NBA. When you have Kristaps in there, they kind of separate themselves. And even their worst nights kind of look like the loss to Denver, right? Where they're going toe-to-toe with probably the other top team as far as, winning the championship that people are looking at right now. And they had their two best players have just wild nights, like just went off. And the Celtics lost by 2 with their guys having a pretty poor night overall. When you look at, the landscape what the Celtics had, they scored 100 points. This team rarely scores 100 points, although, they scored under 100 points against the Clippers here the other night. But that's without KP, right? So when you have KP, your bad night is still pretty good. Your bad night is still going to be pretty good, where you're going to be competing and right there at the end of the night. When you take KP out and you have a bad night against a good team like we saw against the Clippers, you can get blown out of the water. And that's something that when the Celtics are fully healthy, and I think it's directly tied to that KP addition, that doesn't happen. That does not happen with them getting blown out with KP on there. Safe in Milwaukee. That's, the one outlier game of the season that we'll put out there. But I think for that reason, he's made such an impact in his arrival in Boston that, as we said, love Derrick White. But to our question here, how many Celtics will make the All-Star game? If there's going to be 3, it's going to be the Jays and it's going to be KP. And let's be real, you can't break up the Bros. The Bros got to travel together. They travel everywhere.
Cookies and cream, baby. Cookies and cream.
Which apparently Joe Mazzulla gave them that
hilarious.
nickname, which is so good. It's so good.
I love that. That's great. So I think that's probably where it's going to fall. It'll be interesting to see what happens on Thursday night. I believe that's going to be on TNT right before Celtics Lakers, which, by the way, guys, I just saw the other day, got reminded. It's basically our 1-year anniversary of us having met in person in Boston. It was this time last year that we all met up, in Dorchester and then at the game for Celtics Lakers. So happy anniversary to us.
This time last year, we were going for a Wahlburgers breakfast.
That's right. Did a little Wahlburgers out in the South Bay Center. So that was fun times. There's good memories for that to pop up on my social media today. But all right, before we get out of here, guys, let's talk a little bit of Celtics, because they have a kind of a fun week coming up. And I want to talk a little bit about, well, not necessarily dive into the Celtics got their ass kicked over the weekend against the Clippers. We don't necessarily need to dive directly into that, but coming up, Celtics have a pretty tough schedule this week. They've got a back-to-back starting on, if you're listening on this Monday, it'll be tonight against the Pelicans, and then tomorrow night against the Indiana Pacers. And then on Thursday before, or right after, I should say, all-star selections come out, they will renew that actual rivalry with the Los Angeles Lakers. So that will be a fun one. And then Marcus Smart maybe kind of returns on Sunday. We'll see. Maybe he'll be in the crowd. Maybe he won't be. We'll see. But we had a question from our Discord that I wanted to talk about. And if you guys aren't in the Discord, you should join the Discord. Go to the description wherever you're listening to this. There will be a link to join our Discord page. And this question comes from Abe's Mustard Place, which I believe at this point, this individual's just being coy. They won't tell us if they actually own a mustard place or if they actually have any type of stake in the mustard industry. So we don't really know. So if you guys want to find out, you got to join the Discord and you got to message him directly and find out what's the deal with this mustard place thing. But that's a good question that I wanted us to bring up here. So the question they had is, there's clearly some good explanations for some of the losses that we've had. KP out, Murray going off, back-to-back in Milwaukee. But how do you feel about these losses coming against really good teams that we have good chances of seeing in the playoffs? Of course, this is referring to Celtics getting blown out by the Clippers. They had that horrible game against the Bucks. We talked about losing to the Nuggets in a close game. Now 2 straight losses at home. You can throw in a loss to Oklahoma City a few weeks back. So the Celtics, while they have a really good record, actually the best record against 500 plus teams in the NBA at 20-9, we have started to see some of these games against these top teams that either you're going to see in the East or potentially in a finals matchup. We've seen them lose some of these games. Adam, do you think this is any type of cause for concern that the Celtics have dropped a couple of these big-time matchups?
No, I think you can explain 2 of the 3. If we look at the 3 big-time matchups they've lost, 1 to Milwaukee, 1 to Denver, 1 to Clippers. The Milwaukee one was very easy to explain. They were exhausted. It was like, a 5-game in 7-night stretch, 2 sets of back-to-backs. We travel on the second night of both back-to-backs. By the time they got to Milwaukee, they were exhausted. Milwaukee had a big rest advantage. They came into that game looking to prove a point. Boston just didn't have the legs to deal with it. You pull the starters at halftime. That shows you exactly how gassed this team was. I'm not concerned about that. I don't put that anywhere near on my fuck-a-meter at all.
We need to start bringing that back more. That was
the fuck-a-meter. I love it.
So then you move on to the Nuggets game. Again, you could kind of explain it away. The best player in the world went off. His running mate in Murray went off. Your 2 best players went off as well, just with a completely different meaning behind it. Like this milk went bad. That's kind of how the Jays played. You can explain that away. That's more often than not, there's going to be some regression from Jokic and Murray and some progression from Jaylen and Jayson, and things will level out a bit more. Again, doesn't register on my meter. Now, the Clippers game, however, that registers quite highly on my meter because that was, we're getting scored on while we're not scoring, and we're getting scored on, and nothing's really working right now, and then nothing changed. So out of those three, there's only one where I really register as an oh fuck moment. So no, I'm not concerned at all in the slightest. One little bit, one iota, one whatever you want to say, it does not register in anything that scares me right now.
Yeah, I think the point that you brought up, Will, about the Celtics having the best record against teams over 500 in the league, that's what I care about right now. It's like when you look around the league, good teams lose to other good teams all the time. Like to expect the Celtics to go whatever it would be, would be 16-0. You win 16 games in the playoffs, 16-0 in the playoffs to win a title. It just doesn't happen. All the Celtics need to do is win one more game than the other team in a 7-game series, right? That's really what it comes down to. I always bring this up. You go back to the 08 Celtics and the fact that they went to 7 games with the freaking Hawks in the first round. Like this type of shit happens. You know what I mean? You lose some games that you think you're supposed to win, especially in an 82-game season. And you just got to continue to look at trends. There might be some trends that can be a little bit alarming, like what happens when KP goes out. You know, if that game 7 happens and there's an injury like last year, like shit, do we have something else we can go to? The Clippers game was interesting watching it back. I think the Celtics just missed a ton of good shots in the first quarter. Like I'm one of those guys that like the first couple shots of a game, I often think, especially with the Celtics for some reason, I often think, tell me whether or not it's going to be a good game or not. And we got like 2 wide open shots. Horford rimmed out a baseline jumper, and I think it was either White or Holiday back rim to 3. And then like every 3 that we missed in the first half missed in the same way. It like hit the same spot on the rim. And it was just like, oh man, like it's just one of those games. The Celtics don't have it. And then the Clippers had something to prove. You know, we went in there without Kawhi and blew them out of the building in LA. Kawhi's back. He wants to prove something. He looked like a man possessed. So I do think that game against the Clippers, you know, no KP, it's a little alarming to see what the Celtics turn into without him, but I get it, man. I get it without KP because he's the guy in the court. Well, one, he's the tallest guy in the court. And I do think there is like just some, kind of like safety blanket feeling that you get as a basketball player when like the biggest, baddest guy in the court is on your team. You know what I mean? Where you're just like, oh, we're good. Like we got KP. And I think he like kind of unlocks a level of confidence, especially in Jaylen, where Jaylen's just like, I can just give the ball to KP. Like this is pretty fucking sweet. You know? And like when KP's not in there, they just have to work a little bit harder to get shit. And I think that the Clippers were ready for the shit. And I think that, you know, in a 7-game series, you got to make those adjustments. You get blown out in 7-game series all the time. It happens. You just got to see what happens if you come back. And I think, you know, that's what I would be concerned about is if we had a back-to-back against the team and we didn't play as well in the second game and Missoula didn't make some adjustments or whatnot. I think Ty Lue made all the adjustments for the Celtics. Celtics weren't ready for what the Clippers did in that game.
Yeah, I think it just highlights, like I said, the difference between having KP and not having KP, because even if you have him out there, that bridges that gap, right, of being able to utilize him. And I believe there was no Zubac in this game as well, too, right? So if KP's out there, that's a massive matchup that, you know, and I'm sure they'll put Kawhi Leonard on him at different points, but then that takes him off of one of the Jays, right? So that opens up a whole different world when you have KP in there. So when the Celtics are fully healthy, I have very little concern. One thing that I would actually be a little bit more concerned about, and I don't know how many fucks it would register on Adam's meter, but you know, I do look at, you know, at tight games. I still think that's an area of concern for the Celtics, even though we've highlighted they've gotten better looks. You still have to execute and see the ball go in and win some of those tight games. And the Celtics haven't all year, but I'm just looking here at, you know, games decided by 3 points or less. Celtics are 500. That's not terrible. It's not, I don't think it like rings any alarms, but you look at the Bucks, they're 4-2 in those situations. The Cavs are 5-2 in those situations. The Miami Heat are 6-2 in those situations. And so I think sometimes, to your point, when we really start to look at this from, you know, a playoff scenario, you can expect some tight games in there. And that's where, once again, there's a big light on that kind of execution at the end of games and, you know, getting the final result that you need. Not just is the process great, but how does it finish, right? You got to finish it eventually. And especially when you get to the playoffs. So if anything, for me, that's going to be the area that I'm always going to be a little bit more concerned. I think when healthy, this team is they're just so talented. That there's and the fact that they've all talked about sacrificing. We've seen them build chemistry together pretty quickly, which has been pretty impressive to watch on the fly. That I have no concerns when this team's fully healthy. Of course, you remove one piece, and of course, you just got to say, you got to see how that all fits, and you hope it's not that Game 7 scenario like the Celtics ran into last year with Tatum. And people always forget Brogdon being out of that game was really important because
Brogdon was hurt the entire series, bro.
He was hurt the entire series. But I'm just saying from the standpoint of
his elbow, he had like a fucked up elbow.
Right.
And people act like, oh, Malcolm Brogdon just sucked. It's like Malcolm Brogdon was seriously injured.
Yeah. And he was healthy the whole year up until that point. So it just sucked that it was that. And we hopefully we're not having a similar situation with KP. But to the question, I think the Celtics are going to be fine. But a lot of tough games this week. Like I said, Pelicans, Pacers, back-to-back, and then LA on Thursday. So some big games coming up here. Celtics got 6 games left on a 7-game homestand. So a chance for them to reverse the course that we've seen over the last 2 games. Celtics, after going 20-0 at home, have now dropped 2 straight at the TD Garden. And I'll be honest, man, I always feel bad on a Saturday night where it's like, this is going to be the best game to go to. Everybody pays all this money to go to see Celtics, Clippers. You got all this star momentum in there. And then the Celtics have that type of performance. It happens, but I do always feel a little bit bad because I know I'm always nervous when I put all my chips in to go to a game like that, and you never want to get one of those stinkers. But anything else that you guys want to add here before we wrap this up?
What do you think the Celtics go in this homestand? 0-1 right now. Tough games. So we got Pelicans, Pacers, Lakers. I mean, Pelicans, Pacers, Lakers, Grizzlies.
Hawks, and Wizards. So it gets considerably easier after Thursday night.
Okay, so Grizzlies, Hawks, and Wizards. Let's just mark those off as dubs. I feel confident the Celtics should win those games.
Yep.
But this week is a really tough week. You know what I mean? Pelicans, especially if KP, Al, and Luke are all out. I saw an injury report come out that all 3 of them are at least questionable. Maybe one of them's doubtful for the game against the Pelicans, who have Zion, who's just a freaking monster, and they just have size throughout. I think the Pelicans game, you know, they've gotten blown out a few games lately, but we haven't really seen like a really healthy Zion against the Celtics in a little bit. So be interested to see how we deal with them. The Pacers game, man, the Pacers are tough, dude. They just won't freaking die. It
depends if they have Halliburton for that game too. We haven't really seen Halliburton and Siakam together.
Like every time I tune in, because the Pacers are fun to watch, but I see Nesmith. I'm like, God damn it, Nesmith. I hate you now. I hate you. Like everything he does on the court, I'm like, you're gonna hurt somebody, Nesmith. Chill the fuck out.
Yeah.
And I'm just worried anytime we go up against Nesmith that he's gonna hurt somebody.
I'd say today. So for the Pelicans game, you've got with that injury report, they generally have both Al and KP on there anyway because they'll rest one today, one tomorrow. So it's just easier optics wise to have them both as questionable. Because like, hey, it was questionable coming into this game. He played it. Now he needs to rest tomorrow. It's a load of shit. They just don't like playing them both in back-to-backs. I'd expect we'll see Horford. I'd expect they keep KP out for another game after that ankle scare and probably give him just one extra day to rest. And then you get some Nemi. I think Cornette will be out. He's doubtful.
What happened to Cornette?
It says a
hamstring,
hamstring, or thigh, one of the two. So you're going to be out and Nemi in a rotation. I feel like Nemi's just going to stand there and just absorb contact off Zion for the entire game and just be like, you can't move me. Yeah, I really am looking forward to it. I think Boston win that one. I think they edge it. Ingram's going to be fun. McCollum's been playing well-ish. I'm more scared of Indiana. I think the Pacers are so fun, man, and they're so good.
No, I agree. So if KP, say his ankle's not ready, and there's like, you know, let's just hold him out until Thursday against the Lakers. Do you want Horford against the Pelicans tonight or against the Pacers tomorrow?
That's a good question. I think I'd rather him against the Pelicans because the Pacers play so quickly that Horford is good playing against speed because he uses the angles. But it's just, I don't want to give anyone a reason to be like, Horford's washed. You know what I mean? I'd rather him just play against the Pelicans where they're a bit more slow, a bit more physical, it's a matchup that suits Horford's defensive style better than what the Pacers do. And then if you need to, you run Nemi as the starting 5 in a game where he can just run around and be Boston's version of Neesmith. Like, calm down, you're gonna hurt somebody, but at least
you can't forget Valanciunas in the mix for New Orleans as well too, right? Like you got to have a little bit more muscle, and like you said, I think seeing what Nemi tries to do when Zion comes at him will be fun, but he also could foul out in about 7 minutes. So So I think that's where it's like I would lean out more for the Pelicans game if KP ends up sitting out a few extra, which I'm totally okay with. Like we said, KP, it's all about getting him to the playoffs. So whatever we need to do to preserve that, and then we'll see where we're at. I think the Lakers game just really depends on the injury report and who's available. And then LeBron loves giving shit to Boston. So he's going to show up. It's big national TV night. So LeBron's going to be probably amazing in that game. So I think that will be a fun one. But yeah, I think on this one that we're probably looking at in these next 6 games, I'm going to guess 5-1, 4-2 is probably where the Celtics will land over these next 6. But we'll have to see. We'll be back. We'll hit you with a couple of post-game pods. We'll have another podcast later this week, either with the 3 of us or 2 of us. We'll figure out schedule-wise what works best. But, boys, the sun is up now. We started. The sun was down. The sun is up. I got a full cup of coffee in me.
You guys can see the sun.
I'm feeling. The sun's bright here, man. Sun's coming out here. Looks like
Will's got a full cup of coffee. He's getting squirrely. Dude needs to visit the bathroom. Let's wrap this up.
not gonna lie. That's actually probably exactly what's gonna happen here. So with that being said, that's gonna do it for this episode of Green with Envy. We appreciate everybody for tuning in. Greg, well, I think that was your final thought, is that I'm going to run off to the bathroom here as we wrap this episode. So that's going to do it. We appreciate everybody for joining in. We'll play you out with some Black Sheep Optimist from Greg's band down here in Austin, Texas. Texas. We're getting loopy. We got to get the hell out of here.
Everybody.
We got to go. We'll catch you guys later. Peace.
Every time I get this high, I lose my mind. No more until I hit the floor. Every time I get this high, it's you I find. It don't take much no more until I'm at your door.
You cut me to my core, baby. What can I say? You got me on the floor. I came to play. I know I shouldn't, but you seem to take my pain away. And every time I